Hey guys, tonight we slow things down. We set aside our own world with all its noise and its endless choices, and we drift back. Back to a time when your entire life was governed by a set of rules so comprehensive, so absolute, they were woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. Imagine for a moment you are lying not in your bed, but on a simple straw-stuffed pallet. Through a small, unglazed window in the wattle and dab wall of your family's cottage, you can see a sliver of the night sky. The stars are brilliant, a dense canopy of silent, watching light, unspoiled by the glow of any city. They feel close. And just like them, everything on this earth, from the king to the lowliest grubworm, has its proper place. Your place. It has been decided for you, and it will never change. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this, not with our modern love of reinvention and climbing the ladder. Here, there is only one ladder, and you are born onto your rung. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, I'd love to see where and when you're listening. It's always a quiet thrill to see this little community stretching across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Breathe in and out. Let the air fill your lungs and leave slowly. You are born. It is not a sterile, brightly lit affair. There are no machines that beep, no reassuring chatter from scrubs-clad professionals. There is only the low, smoky light of a tallow candle, casting flickering, monstrous shadows on the rough plaster walls. The room is small, thick with the scent of wood smoke, sweat, unwashed bodies, and something else. Something earthy and ferrous. It is the smell of life entering the world. A woman from the village, her hands chapped and her face a roadmap of hard seasons, is the one who guides you. Your mother's breath is ragged. And then, a cry. Your cry. It is the first and last time you will ever announce your rival with such importance. From this moment, the die is cast. As you are cleaned with a rough, damp cloth and swaddled tightly, your identity is already being wrapped around you as securely as the strips of linen. You are not a blank slate. You are not a bundle of infinite potential. You are a soul placed deliberately by the hand of God into a specific slot in the grand design of the world. There's a quiet finality to it that is, in its own way, almost peaceful. There is no agonizing over what you will be when you grow up. You will be what your father is. Your mother's life will be your life. The question is not what you will be, but how well you will bear the station you have been given. As your eyes learn to focus, you begin to perceive your world not in terms of opportunities, but in terms of unshakable truths. This is your family's single-room home. That is the Lord's manor on the hill, a hulking stone presence that seems as natural and permanent as the hill itself. That is the forest, and you will learn exactly which parts you are allowed to enter for firewood and which parts are the Lord's exclusive hunting grounds, where your presence could cost you an ear or worse. These are not just rules, they are the fundamental physics of your universe. And soon, you begin to understand the great overriding structure of this universe. The village priest, a man who smells of incense and old parchment, speaks of it on Sundays. It is a simple, elegant idea that explains everything. Society, he says, is like the body of Christ on earth, and it has three main parts, three great orders of people, known as the three estates. The first, the highest, are the orators, those who pray. These are the archbishops, the monks in their quiet cloisters, the nuns in their secluded convents, and him, your village priest. Their duty is to God. They are the guardians of everyone's souls, the spiritual bedrock of the world. You see them as figures of awe. They wear finer wool than you ever will, dyed in deep, rich colors. Their hands are soft. Their voices are measured. They hold the keys to heaven, and their work is the most important of all, to keep God from smiting the rest of you for your endless petty sins. You might get a laugh out of imagining your priest in a feisty rest, but his fight is against demons you can't even see. He's your special forces, and you pay him in tithes, 1/10 of your meager harvest, for the protection. Next come the bellatores, those who fight. The king, his great lords, the knights, the men-at-arms. Their purpose is to defend the realm, to protect the church, and to keep order. Their work is done with steel and blood. You see them on horseback, impossibly high off the ground, clad in armor that glints and rings with every movement. They are like a different species altogether. They are fed by your labor, and in return they are meant to shield you from bandits, from rival lords, from the horrors of war. They are the strong arm of society, the clenched fist that keeps the world from falling into chaos. Theirs is a life of honor and glory, but also of brutal violence. Historians still argue whether the elaborate codes of chivalry were a genuine civilizing influence or merely a fancy justification for a life of armed aggression. From your vantage point, crouched to the side of the muddy track as a lord's retinue passes, they just seem loud and dangerous. And then there is you. You belong to the third estate, the laboratores, those who work. You are the foundation upon which everything else is built. You are the farmers, the blacksmiths, the weavers, the brewers, the builders. Your hands are chapped, your back aches from a young age, and your life is tied to the rhythm of the seasons. You coax life from the soil to feed the bellies of the men who pray and the men who fight. Your tunic is undyed wool, the color of a sheep. It smells of dirt and sweat and livestock. Your world is one of physical reality, of the heavy plow, the sharp scythe, the ceaseless grinding need to produce. Without you, the knights would starve, and the priests would have no churches to pray in. You know this. They know this. But this knowledge does not change your place. It is the very reason for your place. You are the feet of the social body, humble, dirty, but essential for carrying the whole enterprise forward. This structure isn't presented as a matter of opinion. It's a divine truth, as certain as the sun's journey across the sky. Questioning it would be like questioning gravity. It simply is. This feeling of a preordained order extends beyond humanity. It fills the entire known world in what thinkers of the age call the great chain of being. Picture a single magnificent chain, held in the hand of God himself. Every single thing in creation is a link. Just below God are the angels in their own complexiarchy, seraphim, cherubim, archangels. Below them, humanity. But even that link is graded. A king is closer to the angels than a baron. A baron is above a knight is above a freeman, and you, a serf tied to the land, are at the bottom. But it continues downward. Below humans are the animals, and they have their own internal ranking. The lion is the king of beasts, noble and strong. The fox is cunning but lower. The donkey is humble and stubborn. The snake is the lowliest of all, cursed to crawl on its belly. Even insects have their place. The bee was especially admired as it lived in a colony that seemed to mirror a perfect kingdom with a single monarch and obedient workers. This was seen as a tiny, buzzing lesson in right governance. Then you come to the plants. From the mighty oak, the king of the forest, down to the humble grasses and mosses. And below that, the minerals and stones, from precious gold down to the common rocks you pull from your field. Every single thing has its nature, its purpose, its divinely appointed rank. A lion doesn't try to become a bee. An oak does not envy the rose. A stone does not wish to be a man. And you do not wish to be a lord. Or at least you understand that to wish it is a kind of madness. It's a sin against the very nature of reality. This intricate, beautiful, and deeply constraining philosophy explains everything. It gives you a sense of belonging, a security in knowing your exact place. You are a link in a chain held by God. It may be a low link, but it is necessary. The chain would break without you. This is the first and most important.
This is the first and most important social rule you will ever learn.
This cosmic, God-given order isn't just some abstract philosophy discussed by dusty men in distant universities. It shapes the mud under your feet. That great chain of being you learned about finds its earthly anchor right here, in the small circle of fields and houses that make up your entire world. You look up from the small patch of earth your family tends near your cottage, your croft, and you see the two centers of your universe, the manor house and the church. One owns your body, the other your soul. Your connection to the land is not one of ownership. You don't have a deed, a title, a little piece of paper that says this dirt is yours. Instead, you have a web of obligations. The vast fields that stretch out around the village are divided. A portion is cut into strips, and your family has the right to work several of them to feed yourselves. But a huge chunk of the best land, the Lord's domain, belongs to him directly. And the most important social rule you live by, day in and day out, is that you must work his land before you work your own. This is your primary rent, paid not in coin, but in sweat. A few days every week, you and your father will join the other villagers, trudge to the domain, and labor under the watchful eye of the reeve, a sort of village manager, chosen from among you, whose job is to make sure nobody is slacking. It's a bit like having your landlord also be your boss, your commanding officer, and your supreme court judge all rolled into one. There's no easy way to call in sick. Life settles into an inescapable rhythm dictated by this land and its needs. In the spring, you guide the heavy, ox-drawn plow to break open the sleeping earth. The air smells of damp soil and manure. It is grueling, back-breaking work. You'll spend weeks planting oats, barley, wheat, rye, following the three-field system that lets one field lie fallow, regenerating its strength each year. It's a simple, clever rotation that keeps the land from giving up completely. Then, during the summer, it's endless weeding, tending to the crops under a hot sun. The harvest is a frantic, communal effort. Everyone, men, women, and any child old enough to hold a tool, is out in the fields from dawn until dusk, cutting the grain with sickles. These are the boon days, extra work you owe the Lord, and they are non-negotiable. His harvest must be brought in first. Only then can you turn to your own strips, praying the weather holds. It's a constant, pressing anxiety. Your family's survival through the winter depends on these few frantic weeks. Historians debate the extent to which a medieval manor was a completely self-sufficient island versus being part of a much wider network of local trade. But from where you stand, it feels pretty self-contained. The Lord provides the land, the mill to grind your grain, for which he takes a portion, the great oven to bake your bread, for which he also takes a portion, and protection from the outside world. In return, you provide the labor that feeds his household, his nights, and fuels his entire existence. You are tied to this land. You cannot leave without the Lord's permission. To run away is a crime, stealing yourself from your master. He is your asset as much as his horse or his fields. This isn't seen as slavery. It is simply the natural, inherited state of things. It's your place in the chain. The second great pillar of your world is the church. Its stone spire is likely the tallest thing you have ever seen. And just as the seasons rule your year, the church bell rules your day. It rings to call you to wake, to mark the hours of work, and to call you home for your evening meal. It is the metronome of your life. On 6 days you work, but the seventh, Sunday, is for God. You file into the parish church, a building that smells of cool stone, beeswax, incense, and the collective, unwashed presence of the entire village crammed into one space. The service is in Latin, a language you do not understand. You follow along by watching the priest's gestures, by knowing the rhythm of the Mass. You gaze up at the images painted on the walls, vivid scenes of saints, angels, and terrifying bug-eyed demons casting the damned into a fiery hellmouth. This is your catechism, your visual instruction. Be good, the paintings say, or this is what awaits you. But the church is more than just a place of worship. Sunday is also the main social event of the week. After the service, the churchyard buzzes with life. It's where news is shared, where business is conducted, where young men might try to catch the eye of a certain girl. It's the village bulletin board and town square combined. And the priest knows everything. He christened you, he will hear your confession, he will marry you, and he will bury you. He knows who is feuding with who drinks too much, whose piety is more performance than truth. This leads you to another fundamental social rule of your local world. Your inner life is not your own. Your sins are the business of the church. At least once a year, before Easter, you are required to make a confession. You kneel in a quiet corner of the church and whisper your failings to the priest. Pride, envy, anger, lust, the lie you told your neighbor, the scrap of wool you pilfered. And the priest gives you your penance. For minor sins, it might be a number of prayers. But for more serious or public transgressions, the penance could also be public. You might be ordered to stand at the church door, dressed in a simple white sheet, barefoot, for all to see. You might have to publicly ask forgiveness from the person you wronged. There's no anonymous therapy here. Your path to forgiveness is often a spectacle, a warning to others. Your spiritual health is a communal concern. In between the heavy work and the solemn piety, the church calendar also provides the only real breaks you get. The word holiday comes directly from these holy days, feast days celebrating a particular saint. Many of these, like Plough Monday or Michaelmas, become chances for celebration. Ales, dances, rowdy games. There's a particular kind of medieval revelry that often balanced on the edge of chaos. For a single day, the rigid social order might be playfully inverted in a festival overseen by a lord of misrule. One quirky example from some parts of Europe was the Feast of the Boy Bishop, where a choir boy was chosen to symbolically take the role of the bishop for a day, holding processions and giving sermons. It was a pressure valve, a moment of sanctioned foolishness before the grim realities of life slammed back into place. Living in such a small, enclosed world, with the Lord's reeve watching you in the fields and the priest watching you in the church, you learn the final great social rule of your local world. Your reputation is everything. There is no anonymity.
Everyone knows your parents, your grandparents, your business. And so the primary tool of social enforcement isn't a police force, but gossip. A loose tongue can be more damaging than a fist. Was your ale watered down? Are your weights and measures honest? Were you seen talking a little too long with someone else's husband behind the hayrick? The rumor mill is vicious, and a bad name is almost impossible to shake. Being known as a scold, a cheat, or a slattern is a public label that can lead to shunning and formal punishment. Gossip here isn't just entertainment. It's a vital, if brutal, system of checks and balances. It's the medieval equivalent of a social credit score, and letting it drop too low can make your already hard life nearly unbearable. Your labor belongs to the Lord, your soul belongs to the church, and your character belongs to the village. There is no part of you left over that is truly, privately, your own. And in this strangely interconnected, completely exposed life, you must now learn to eat your dinner without disgusting your superiors.
And so, through some fluke, some rare holy day, or a moment of inexplicable lordly generosity, you find yourself inside the great hall of the manor. Perhaps you are there to help carry in the platters of food, or to serve the ale, allowed to stand at the edge of the room where the torchlight gives way to shadow. The change in atmosphere from your small, smoky cottage is overwhelming. The air is thick with a dozen powerful smells. There's the mouth-watering scent of roasting meat, perhaps a whole pig turning on a spit in the kitchens, its fat crackling and dripping. There is the heady aroma of wood smoke from the massive central hearth, a fire pit so large you could stand inside it. Underneath it all is the scent of the floor rushes, bundles of reeds and sweet-smelling herbs strewn about to soak up spills, and theoretically to mask the smell of the dogs who wander freely, sniffing for fallen scraps, and the smell of the 50 or so other humans crammed into the hall, none of whom has had a proper bath in months. You are witnessing firsthand the rules of status performed as a magnificent edible theater. And the very first act is the seating chart. Your entire worth, your place in the chain of being, can be determined by where your bottom is planted for the evening. The Lord, his lady, their immediate family, and any high-ranking guests sit at the high cable. It's set upon a raised platform at one end of the hall, making them physically higher than everyone else. They are quite literally looked up to. Down the length of the hall, running perpendicular to the high table, are several long, rough trestle tables where everyone else sits on simple benches. But there is a crucial dividing line. On the high table sits an object of immense value and symbolic power, the salt cellar. It might be an elaborate boat-shaped vessel made of silver or pewter, filled with precious white salt. This mineral, which we now pour so freely, was a luxury, a preservative, a sign of wealth. And the saying, "know your place," is made physical right here. To sit above the salt means you are seated at the high table, or at least on the same side of the salt cellar as the Lord, a position of honor. To sit below the salt is to be seated further down the trestle tables, away from the warmth of the fire and the choicest cuts of meat, mingling with the lesser knights, the household functionaries, and the general riffraff. You, if you were to sit at all, would be at the furthest possible end of the furthest possible table, so far below the salt that you'd be lucky to get a salty whiff of it from across the room. It's a beautifully simple, brutal system. No name cards needed. Everyone knows the geography of their own importance. Now imagine you've been allowed to take a seat, squished between a minor man-at-arms and a falconer who smells faintly of bird. You look down at the table. There is no plate, no fork, no water glass, no neat little roll on a side dish. The table is bare, save for the cloth table, which, depending on the household standards of cleanliness, may or may not be cleaner than your tunic. Instead, you are given a trencher. This is a thick, square slab of old, hard bread. This is your plate. Its job is to be a base for the food that will be ladled out from a common pot or platter. It soaks up the juices, the gravies, the sauces. It is food's first stop on its way to you. Historians still argue whether the detailed instructions in surviving books of courtesy represent how people actually behaved, or if they were more of a desperate attempt to impose order on what was often a chaotic, drunken affair. You do not get your own of everything. You will be sharing your food and your drink with the person sitting next to you. You are part of a mess, a small group of 2 or 4 people who will be served from the same dishes. The pottage, a thick stew of grains and whatever vegetables are on hand, will be placed between you. And your cup, perhaps a simple wooden bowl known as a mazer, will also be shared. You take a drink and you pass it to your neighbor. You trust he has the good grace to wipe his lips before drinking, and you hope that the bit of pottage you see clinging to his beard from his last spoonful doesn't decide to take a swim in your shared ale. It's a system that requires a certain level of social trust and a strong stomach. Personal hygiene here is not a private matter, it's a communal courtesy. So, how do you get the food from the shared dish onto your bread trencher and into your mouth without earning a slap from the reeve? You have one tool that belongs to you and you alone, your knife. It hangs at your belt, you brought it with you. The fork is an object of deep suspicion in most of medieval Europe, seen as a bizarrely dainty and somewhat unmanly Italian affectation. Some even viewed its 2-pronged shape as a miniature devil's pitchfork, not something you want at a respectable table. Your knife is for cutting your meat, but there are rules, and oh, are there rules. First, you do not, under any circumstances, put your own knife into the common dish. That would be like double dipping in the extreme. You use a serving spoon, if provided, to move a portion onto your trencher. Then you use your own knife to cut it into smaller pieces. You absolutely do not lick your knife clean. This is considered profoundly disgusting, and you never ever use its point to pick food out of your teeth. That's what God gave you fingernails for, in private, after the meal, I suppose. Waving your knife around to tell a story is a good way to lose both your argument and a friendship. The knife is a tool, not an extension of your personality. Your other primary tools are your 2 hands, or more precisely, one of them. Polite society dictates that you eat with your right hand only, using just the thumb and first 2 fingers. The left hand is kept off the table, perhaps resting in your lap, to be used for non-food related tasks, like grabbing your shared cup. Before the meal, and sometimes between courses if it's a particularly grand affair, a servant will come around with a ewer of water and a basin, pouring water over your hands for you to wash. This isn't for sanitation in the modern sense. It's about not being visibly filthy. You're expected to keep your 3 eating fingers as clean as possible. You do not place a greasy, half-chewed piece of meat back onto the common platter, and you certainly do not stick your slobbery fingers into the salt cellar. To take salt, you would take your clean knife point and lift a small amount onto your trencher. At the end of the meal, what happens to your now soggy, gravy-soaked bread plate? If you are still very hungry, you might just eat your trencher. Waste not, want not, after all. Or, in a slightly grander gesture of performative charity, your Lord might command that all the used trenchers be collected and given as alms to the poor, who are often waiting by the manor gate. They get a filling, if rather messy, donation. The Lord gets to show off how pious and generous he is. Everybody wins, sort of. It's the most medieval form of recycling imaginable. Watching the nobles and trying to mimic their manners feels like a high-stakes, confusing dance. You are just trying to not be noticed, to not spill ale on the man next to you, and to get enough food in your stomach to justify this stressful experience. All while some fellow with a lute plays the same slightly sad song for the 5th time, and you thought your life was complicated before. The last echo of the lute fades, the torches are extinguished one by one, and you slip away from the manor, back into the quiet darkness of the village. The great hall, with its rigid rules of seating and sharing, was a stage for displaying one's public worth. But now, in the quiet of your own mind, you are left to ponder a different set of rules, a code that governs the strange, treacherous territory of the human heart. You've heard the songs sung by traveling minstrels, tales spun in the firelight. They speak of a kind of love so refined, so elegant, it seems like a different emotion entirely from anything you know. They call it courtly love. It is a game played only by the nobles, those with the leisure time to devote to such intricate emotional maneuvering. The subject of this love is almost always a lady of very high status, beautiful, virtuous, and, this is the important part, completely unattainable. She is usually married to the knight's own lord. This isn't about setting up a new household. It's about the spiritual elevation of the lover. The knight, smitten with his chosen lady, dedicates his every noble deed to her. He wears her colors, a silk ribbon or a handkerchief she has given him, into the tournament. He writes her agonizingly beautiful poems, filled with sighs and longings. His love for her is meant to make him a better man, more courageous in battle, more pious in church, more graceful at court. It is a secret, a thrilling and delicious torment shared between the two of them, through stolen glances across the high table and messages passed through a trusted lady in waiting. The love is rarely, if ever, meant to be physically consummated. Its entire power lies in the longing, the idealization. To sully it with the clumsy reality of a physical affair would be to break the spell. Or at least, that's the theory. This entire phenomenon might just be the most elaborate friend-zoning in human history. The greatest patron of this idea was Eleanor of Aquitaine, a powerhouse of a queen in both France and England. Some writers of the time even described her and her daughters presiding over courts of love, where ladies would gather to debate thorny romantic questions like, can true love exist between married people? The answer was, almost universally, no. For a long time, we imagined these as actual formal courts, but historians now largely agree they were probably just a literary fantasy, a way for poets to explore these new romantic ideas. From your perspective, huddled in your cottage, this entire phenomenon is utterly bizarre. You and the other villagers live lives dictated by brutal pragmatism. Wasting your time pining for someone you cannot possibly have is a luxury as unaffordable as a suit of armor. Your love life, you will soon discover, is not a game of the heart. It is a transaction of property. One day, you notice your parents looking at you differently. They assess you not just with simple affection, but with a new, calculating gaze. You have reached an age where you represent an opportunity. You are no longer just a mouth to feed or a pair of hands for labor. You are a bargaining chip. Your marriage will not be your choice. It will be an arrangement, a carefully negotiated contract between your family and another. For the men, love doesn't enter the equation. The questions are practical. Does the girl's family have decent strips of land? Is she known to be a hard worker, strong of hip and back for bearing children and the burdens of farm life? Is her family reputable, or are they known drunks and idlers? For the women, the questions are equally blunt. Is the boy a steady worker? Will he inherit his father's tools or tenancy? Does he spend all his free time at the alehouse? Is he cruel? Your father will meet with the father of your potential spouse, perhaps over a jug of ale to smooth the way, and they will hammer out a deal. The central element of this deal is the dowry, the wealth, whether in coin,
livestock, or household goods that the bride's family gives to the groom's family. This is to help establish the new household and to compensate the groom's family for taking on another person to support. It is the woman's contribution to the new marital enterprise. You might be betrothed through one of these arrangements years before you were old enough to marry. The church officially taught that the essential ingredient for a valid marriage was the free consent of the two individuals getting married, spoken to each other in the present tense. But in practice, family and economic pressures made that free consent more of a technicality. You were expected to consent to the arrangement that had been made for your own good and the good of your family. It's a bit like being told you have free choice at dinner when the only thing on the table is pottage. You can choose to eat it, or you can choose to starve. Once your parents have shaken hands on the deal, sealing your fate, the matter is taken out of their hands and put into the hands of the church. You cannot simply go to the priest and get married the next day. The entire village must now be officially informed of your intentions through a process known as the banns of matrimony. On 3 separate Sundays or major holy days during the main service, the priest will stand before the congregation and announce that you, son of so-and-so, intend to marry her, daughter of so-and-so. He will then ask if anyone knows of any reason why the marriage should not lawfully take place. Standing there in the crowded church, hearing your name linked with another, broadcast to every person you have ever known, is a moment of profound public scrutiny. This isn't for dramatic effect. It serves a vital purpose. The church has very strict rules about who can marry whom. The laws of consanguinity, or blood relation, are incredibly complex. You couldn't marry anyone up to your 7th cousin, a rule so broad that in a small, isolated village, it was a miracle anyone could legally marry at all. The bans are a chance for the old woman in the back pew who knows everyone's family tree to pipe up and say, "Wait a moment, Father. His great-grandmother and her great-great-uncle were brother and sister." An objection like that could stop everything in its tracks. The bans were also a way to uncover prior contracts. Did the boy, in a moment of youthful passion, promise himself to another girl? In the eyes of the church, that promise, if worded correctly, could constitute a binding pre-contract, making this new marriage invalid. You just have to stand there and pray that no one has any dirt on you or your intended, and that everyone has kept their family histories straight. If you pass through the 3 weeks of public vetting without incident, the day finally arrives. The ceremony itself doesn't even happen inside the church. It takes place on the porch, before the main doors, in the open air where everyone can see and hear. This is the ultimate social rule. Marriage is a public act. In the presence of your family, your neighbors, and your Lord's reeve, you make your vows. You exchange rings. The priest gives his blessing. Only then, once the legal and social contract is sealed for all to witness, are you led inside the church for a special mass to sanctify your new union. Your life is no longer just your own. You are a new household, a new economic unit, a new link in the social chain of the village, forged not by romantic love, but by land, labor, and law. Now your next challenge is to live out that contract without falling afoul of an even stricter set of rules.
You are married now. The village celebrated with an ale, a simple feast,
and a few rough dances. You and your new spouse have moved into a small cottage, perhaps one vacated by a death or newly built with the help of your neighbors. The rhythms of life, tied to the seasons and the land, continue. But now you face them as a single unit, a family. Your duties are clear, your obligations set. Life is hard, but it is orderly. And the most important social rule you must now learn is how to stay within the lines, because the consequences of coloring outside them are not private or discreet. They are a public spectacle, designed to be as shameful as they are painful. For the common, everyday transgressions, selling underweight bread, spreading malicious gossip, scolding your husband too loudly in the street, the punishments are meant to humiliate you back into conformity. Imagine your neighbor, a baker who got a little too creative with his flour to sawdust ratio. He isn't given a fine or a sternly worded letter. He is sentenced to be drawn through the village streets, tied to a hurdle, a wooden frame, with the offending loaf of bread hung around his neck for everyone to jeer at and perhaps throw things that are better left unimagined. The punishment fits the crime with a brutal, symbolic clarity. The village has its own low-key enforcement hardware for this kind of thing. Near the village green, or perhaps right outside the churchyard for maximum exposure, you'll find the stocks. These are the classic wooden planks with holes for the offender's ankles and wrists. To be put in the stocks for a day is a profoundly miserable experience. You are helpless, unable to shoo away flies or stray dogs. You are at the mercy of the village, a captive audience for their taunts, their rotten vegetables, and their righteous indignation. For someone accused of being a common scold or an eavesdropper, there might be a scold's bridle or brank, an iron muzzle with a small metal plate that would be inserted into the mouth to press down on the tongue, making speech impossible. The devices were cruel, designed not just for silence, but for shame. You don't just get punished, you are made into a living billboard advertising your own misdeed.
A quirky but very real form of community-led justice was the charivari, or what was called rough music in England. If a couple was known for fighting, if an old widower married a very young woman, or if a husband was rumored to be beaten by his wife, a profound reversal of the natural order, the youths of the village might take matters into their own hands. Late at night, they would gather outside the offending house and create a cacophony, banging pots and pans, blowing horns, singing lewd songs, and shouting abuse. This wasn't just a drunken prank. It was a recognized, semi-sanctioned ritual of social disapproval. It was the village's way of saying, your private life is so out of line that it has become our public business, and we will make your life miserable until you fix it. You learned quickly to keep your disputes quiet and your household in acceptable order. Remember the perils of gossip we talked about? This is gossip put to music. But some offenses go beyond the baker's dozen or a noisy marriage. Some trespasses are sins of the soul, and for those you answer to a different authority. You might be summoned to appear before the church court. This isn't about theft or violence. That's the Lord's court. The church court concerns itself with spiritual and moral failings, heresy, blasphemy, adultery, usury, charging interest on a loan, witchcraft, and failure to pay your tithe to the church. These are the crimes on their docket. You stand not before the Lord's reeve in the great hall, but before a grim-faced assembly of clerics in a chamber of the church. The air smells of old books and authority. The proceedings are in Latin, translated for you by a clerk. Witnesses are called. Evidence, often consisting of village rumor and hearsay, is presented. And if you are found guilty, the penances can be severe. You might be ordered to undertake a long pilgrimage to a distant shrine, walking barefoot and begging for your food. You could be subject to repeated public humiliations, like being whipped around the church on 7 consecutive Sundays. Or you might be excommunicated. This is the spiritual atom bomb. To be excommunicated is to be cut off from the body of Christ. You cannot receive the sacraments. You cannot be buried in consecrated ground. And other good Christians are technically forbidden from associating with you. It's a spiritual death sentence that makes you a pariah in this life and is believed to condemn you to hell in the next. The Church's power over your immortal soul gives it a terrifying degree of power over your mortal body. And then there is the final step, the point of no return. What happens if you commit a crime so grave, a murder, a treason, a repeated refusal to bow to the authority of either the Lord or the Church, that you cannot be contained by the stocks or shamed by the village? You are declared an outlaw. This is not simply a matter of being a wanted criminal, a fugitive hiding in the woods. To be made an outlaw is to be ceremonially cast out from the community of law itself. A legal proceeding declares you caput lupinum, a wolf's head. This ancient and chilling term means that you are no longer legally a person. You have no rights. You have no protection. You can be killed on sight by anyone who finds you, and that person would not be charged with any crime. In fact, they might even be rewarded. You are officially a wild beast to be hunted. Your property is forfeit. Your family is shamed. You are pushed out of the warm circle of human society into the literal and figurative wilderness. The greenwood, the forest that felt like a resource when you were a villager, now becomes your only refuge, and it is a place filled with real wolves, cold nights, and the constant fear of the hunter's horn. Life becomes a desperate, hour-to-hour scramble for survival. You are no longer on any rung of the great chain of being. The chain has been broken, and you are cast away. This is the ultimate social rule, the one that underpins all others. The group can and will excise a part of itself to ensure the health of the whole. Your personal survival is less important than the survival of the order. And so you lie there, on your straw-stuffed pallet, listening to the quiet breathing of your family. You feel the rough weave of your woolen blanket. You can faintly smell the wood smoke still clinging to the air from last night's fire. The sky outside the window is beginning to lighten from black to a deep indigo. Soon the church bell will ring, calling you to another day of labor. Another day of living within this intricate, unyielding web of rules. You know your place. You know the cost of stepping out of it. And there is a strange, deep, and profoundly human comfort in the simple fact that you have survived another night, a properly functioning, if lowly, link in the great chain of being. And for now, that is enough.
What it was like to follow Victorian dress codes.
The first thing you notice is the cold. Not a dramatic, biting cold, but a deep, persistent chill that has settled into the very bones of the house overnight. Dawn is still just a rumor, a faint, gray suggestion of light filtering through the heavy curtains of your bedchamber. There was no friendly hiss of a radiator, no gentle hum of central heating to welcome you to the morning. There was only the silence of the house and the small white cloud of your own breath as you finally push back the thick quilt and swing your feet out of bed. The floorboards are smooth and cold beneath your bare soles. Your first task is a simple one: hygiene. A large ceramic pitcher, painted with delicate blue flowers, sits in a matching basin on your washstand. You pour the water, and the splash seems unnaturally loud in the quiet room. It is shockingly, breathtakingly cold. You take up a small square of linen, dip it into the basin, and begin the brisk, methodical task of washing your face and hands. There is no luxurious lather, just the clean, sharp scent of plain soap and cold water. A brief, invigorating splash that promises to wake you up faster than any artisanal coffee bean ever could. You pat your skin dry, the linen rough against your cheeks. And now, the day truly begins. Not with coffee, not with breakfast, but with the slow, deliberate construction of you. You are a building, and you must begin with the foundations. First, the camise. It lies waiting for you, a simple, shapeless garment of fine white linen or cotton, laid out on a nearby chair. It feels cool and soft as you pull it over your head. It's a humble piece, one no one outside your most intimate circle will ever see. Yet it is arguably the most important layer you will put on all day. This is your personal shield. It will protect your expensive, difficult-to-clean outer garments from the oils and perspiration of your body, and in turn protect your skin from the tougher, more abrasive materials to come. It's the one item that will be washed with frequency, bleached under the sun, and scrubbed with fierce determination. It is the silent workhorse hero of your wardrobe. You smooth it down. It falls to about your knees, loose and comfortable. For now. Next, you reach for your drawers. These are not the tiny, fitted underthings of a future you cannot imagine. They are bifurcated garments, two separate tubes of cotton joined only at the waistband. They are surprisingly, and perhaps wisely, open through the center, a design feature that we'll call aerodynamic for politeness' sake. This may seem strange to the modern mind, but it is a masterclass in practicality. Navigating the necessaries of life is infinitely simpler when you don't have to battle your way through a dozen layers of fabric. They feel airy and light as you tie them securely at your waist, their length disappearing beneath the hem of your camise. Now for your feet. You sit on the edge of a small upholstered chair to pull on your stockings. They might be made of practical black wool for a winter morning like this one, or perhaps fine, elegant silk if your station in life allows. There is no elastic to be found here. That particular magic has yet to be widely embraced. Instead, you secure each stocking just above your knee with a garter, a simple ribbon of silk, or a more structured band of woven fabric tied in a neat and firm bow. You run a hand over your calf, ensuring the stocking is smooth, without any unseemly wrinkles or bags. With your lower half addressed, you stand and turn to the true centerpiece of the morning's ritual, the corset. It waits for you, resting on the bed
like a dormant creature. It is a thing of strange beauty, constructed from stiff, unforgiving coutil fabric and reinforced with thin, flexible strips of whalebone, or more accurately, baleen. Later in the century, stronger and cheaper steel will become the standard. Today, yours is a pale cream color, elegantly stitched, with a formidable-looking metal busk down the front, complete with hooks and clasps. You hold it up, positioning it around your torso, just above your hips. The busk is your entry point. You fasten the large metal loops over their corresponding studs, one by one, creating a rigid wall at your front. Then you reach behind you for the laces. Perhaps you have a lady's maid to assist you, her nimble fingers working quickly. Or perhaps, like so many women, you manage this yourself, pulling the long cords through their metal eyelets in a practiced rhythm. You do not yank or strain violently. The breathless, fainting maiden is more caricature than reality for daily dressing. This is a gradual process, a firm, steady pressure that slowly, inexorably coaxes your waist inward and pushes your bust upward. It is not about achieving an impossible, minuscule waist for your everyday life, but about creating a smooth, solid V-shaped torso upon which the rest of your clothes can hang correctly. It's about posture. It holds you erect, discouraging any unladylike slouching. Your internal organs are very close companions now, whether they wanted to or not. Still, you can breathe, you can move. This is your armor. Historians still argue whether the primary driver of such restrictive undergarments was a patriarchal society's desire to mold the female form into an idealized object, or whether it represented a form of female agency, a way for a woman to physically shape herself, to exert control over her own silhouette, and participate in the height of fashion. The truth, as it often does, lies somewhere in between. Some women hated their corsets, seeing them as prisons of bone and thread. Others wrote passionately in their defense, praising the support and the elegant line they provided. A few even experimented with what were called health corsets, strange contraptions with elastic panels or infused with the supposed power of magnetism, a little bit of that wonderful Victorian belief in scientific cure-alls. Over the rigid form of the corset goes a corset cover, a simple cotton bodice that softens the hard lines of the boning and protects your dress from the corset's hardware. It adds a layer of modesty, concealing the outline of the undergarment beneath the delicate fabrics of a blouse or bodice. Now, for the architecture. It is the age of the great bell-shaped skirt, and you will not achieve that voluminous silhouette with mere fabric. You reach for your cage crinoline. It is a surprisingly light and flexible dome, crafted from a series of interconnected steel hoops of increasing size, all held together with vertical strips of canvas tape. Stepping into it is like stepping into the skeleton of a skirt. You pull it up and fasten it around your waist. It feels strange, swaying around your legs with a life of its own, bouncing gently with every movement. It's a technological marvel, really, freeing you from the crushing weight of the 6 or 7 heavy petticoats women wore in the decades before. Still, you are not quite done. A cage must be hidden. You pull one or two lightweight petticoats over the crinoline, one of simple cotton to provide a basic layer, and perhaps another, more decorative one with ruffles or lace at the hem. These serve a dual purpose. They entirely obscure the metal rings of the cage from being visible through your dress, and they soften the overall shape, preventing the rigid lines of the steel from showing.
You stand now, fully encased in your foundational layers. You are a smooth, unwavering torso rising from a wide, perfect bell. The sun has climbed a little higher, and the gray light in your room has softened to a pale, watery yellow. Outside, the world is beginning to stir. Your own journey, however, has only just begun. From the skin out, you have constructed the proper shape. You are a blank canvas, perfectly primed and prepared for the colors and textures of the day. Your wardrobe stands before you, a formidable piece of dark, polished mahogany. Inside hang not a multitude of options, but a carefully curated selection of dresses, each with a specific purpose. For this morning, spent within the confines of your own home, you select a morning dress. It's made of a soft, fine wool challis, printed with small, repeating florals. The bodice is separate from the skirt, a common and practical design. You pull the skirt on over your petticoats and crinoline, and the sheer volume of fabric settles with a soft whoosh around the hidden cage. The waistband is cinched tight and fastened with sturdy hooks and eyes. Next comes the bodice. It is high-necked, with long, fitted sleeves that widen near the wrist into a slight bell shape, designed to show off the delicate, starched white cotton of the engageants, or false undersleeves, that you've attached inside the cuffs. These, like the detachable collars, were a clever innovation, allowing the visible parts of your linen to be laundered without having to wash the entire garment. You turn your back to the long mirror, or enlist your maid to begin the fastening. This is a task of patience. A row of tiny, fabric-covered buttons runs from the nape of your neck down to your waist. Or perhaps it's an equally long and fiddly series of hooks and eyes. There is a reason the button hook is an essential household tool. It's the 19th century equivalent of a password manager, required for daily access to your own clothes. You add a final touch at the collar, a simple brooch of carved jet, a common accessory that speaks to the era's long and public mourning of Prince Albert. Your reflection shows a woman perfectly, respectably dressed for a morning at home. Your silhouette is precisely as it should be, a narrow, demure torso flaring into a dramatic, bell-shaped skirt. The effect is one of delicate containment, of artifice and grace all at once. But you are not to remain indoors all day. A visit to the circulating library and a social call are on the agenda, and for that, you must be prepared to face the outside world. Your morning dress is suitable enough for a simple errand, but it must be properly accessorized. First, your footwear. You sit and point your toe, and a pair of leather boots are slipped onto your feet. They come up past your ankle and are fastened with a long row of tiny buttons, each one painstakingly maneuvered through its corresponding hole with the thin metal hook of that indispensable tool. They're elegant, but their thin leather soles mean you will feel every uneven cobblestone on your walk. Next, the bonnet. This is not a casual accessory. It is a mandatory piece of public armor. You place it on your head, careful not to disturb your neatly parted and smoothed hair. The bonnet sits far back, framing your face like a picture. Its wide silk ribbons are brought down and tied in a large, luxurious bow beneath your chin. Its primary function, beyond modesty,
is to restrict your view of the world. Peripheral vision is, after all, a rather modern indulgence. You are encouraged, by design, to look straight ahead, to be a woman of purpose and direction, not one whose gaze wanders idly. Then comes a mantle, a short cape-like garment that provides an essential layer of warmth and covers your shoulders. And finally, the most crucial of all public-facing accessories, your gloves. You must never, ever be seen outdoors with bare hands. It is simply not done. You sit and gently, painstakingly work your fingers into a pair of tight-fitting kid leather gloves. You smooth them down over your palms and fasten the single button at the wrist. Your hands are now officially sealed for public viewing. As you step outside, your crinoline sways around you. Navigating the world with this much square footage requires a certain skill. A narrow doorway becomes a strategic puzzle, a crowded pavement a series of delicate negotiations. You must hold your skirt up slightly when you cross a street, not just for cleanliness, but to avoid catching the steel hoops on a stray carriage or step. It is in moments like this that the cage, for all its liberation from heavy petticoats, feels very much like a cage. On your walk, you pass another woman dressed in the most astonishing shade of green, a brilliant, almost luminous emerald that catches the eye instantly. This is the color of high fashion, made possible by a new dye process involving arsenic. This Shields green, as it's known, is used in fabrics, wallpapers, and artificial flowers. It's vibrant, beautiful, and of course, quietly poisonous, slowly releasing arsenic into the air or directly into the skin of the wearer. A quirky little fact of life. To be truly fashionable, you sometimes had to risk a slow, stylish poisoning. After retrieving a novel from the library, you proceed to make a social call. You arrive at the home of an acquaintance, and here, a whole new set of rules comes into play. You don't simply knock. You retrieve your calling card case, a small, often beautifully crafted box of silver or tortoiseshell, and present your card to the maid who answers the door. This card, with your name and sometimes your address, is the key to the entire social world. Historians debate whether these complex rules were a genuine system of social order or simply a way for the upper classes to create barriers to entry, a secret language of fabric and gesture designed to exclude the nouveau riche who might have the money for the dress but not the knowledge of how to operate within it. You are in luck. The lady of the house is at home and receiving visitors. You are shown into the parlor. The rules of gloves are now paramount. For a social visit like this, you will keep your gloves on. To remove them would suggest you are staying for a long time, an act of undue familiarity. You might loosen them at the wrist for tea, but they remain. Had this been a dinner party, you would remove them entirely upon being seated at the table. It is a subtle but deeply significant distinction. You sit, your back ramrod straight thanks to your corset, and make pleasant, tranquil conversation, the very model of daytime propriety. The vibrant new synthetic dyes, first discovered by William Henry Perkin in 1856 when his failed attempt to synthesize quinine from malaria resulted in a rich purple he called movine, have brought a shocking rainbow of color to parlors like this one. Silks and wools now boast brilliant magentas, startling blues, and royal purples that were once the exclusive domain of emperors. Your world, for all its rigidity, is becoming more colorful by the day. After precisely 20 minutes, the socially accepted length for such a call, you rise, take your leave, and step back out into the fading afternoon light, your sartorial duty done. For now.
The afternoon light has softened into a dusty rose, casting long shadows across the parlor as you return from your social duties. The air inside the house feels still and warm compared to the encroaching chill of dusk. Your day of navigating the public sphere is over, and with it, the utility of your daytime armor has expired. There is a sense of transition in the air, a shifting of purpose, not just for the day, but for yourself. You move back toward the privacy of your bedchamber, the gentle rustle of your wool challis skirt, a familiar, slightly weary sound. The first act of this transformation is deconstruction. The bonnet is untied, its silk ribbons sighing as they come loose, and placed carefully back in its box. Your mantle is unclasped and hung away. Then the gloves, peeled off finger by finger in a slow, satisfying release. Your hands feel strangely light and exposed after hours of confinement in their kid leather prisons. You wiggle your fingers, enjoying the simple freedom. You stand before the mirror as the tiny buttons of your bodice are undone, one by one. The relief is palpable as the high collar falls away from your neck and the fitted wool is drawn off your arms. The skirt is next, its heavy waistband unhooked, and the great dome of fabric is lifted over your head, finally freeing the crinoline beneath. It sways there for a moment, a skeletal ghost of the skirt it just supported. You are now back in your foundational layers: chemise, drawers, corset, and cage. But this is not an endpoint. It is merely the clearing of the stage for the second act. Tonight, you are attending a small ball. This requires a different self entirely, one built not for propriety and errands, but for light, music, and display. This version of you requires a different, more specialized foundation. While your maid prepares, you might take a moment to sit, but your posture remains infallibly erect, enforced by the whalebone sentinels of your corset. Some women owned different corsets for day and evening. An evening corset might be made of finer materials, pale silked or satin instead of sturdy coutil, and perhaps laced a little more snugly, creating an even more dramatic V-shape to the waist and pushing the bust higher, in preparation for the evening's dramatic neckline. Now for the head. The simple, neatly parted hairstyle of the day will not do. Your maid works with brush and comb, her fingers quick and practiced. Your hair is twisted, plaited, and pinned into an intricate construction at the back of your head. Perhaps false hair pieces, matched perfectly to your own color, are woven in to add fashionable volume and height. The final coiffure is held in place with bone hairpins and a misting of pomade to tame any stray wisps, giving it a soft, polished sheen. A delicate circlet of silk flowers or a glittering ornamental comb is the final flourish. Next, a gentle application of powder. A fine dusting of rice powder is patted onto your face, neck, and shoulders. The goal is a pale, uniform canvas, a sign of a life lived indoors, away from the browning effects of the sun. The décolletage, the expanse of skin on the upper chest that will soon be revealed, receives special attention, ensuring it is as smooth and white as alabaster. Any touch of color to the cheeks or lips would be applied with the utmost discretion, intended to mimic a natural, healthy flush rather than advertise the use of cosmetics, which were still associated with actresses and women of ill repute. And now for the gown itself. It has been waiting, laid out carefully on your bed, a creature of light and air. It is entirely different from your sensible day dress. It is crafted from yards and yards of pale blue silk taffeta that shimmers in the growing gaslight from the sconce on the wall. Its most striking feature is its bodice. Where your morning dress was buttoned to the chin, this one is daringly low, cut wide off the shoulders to reveal your entire neck, your collarbones, and the gentle swell of your bust. It has no sleeves to speak of, merely a tiny puff of fabric at the shoulder, a decorative suggestion that only serves to emphasize the bareness of your arms. Historians continue to discuss the fascinating contradiction of Victorian society, how an era so famously fixated on public modesty could simultaneously champion an evening fashion that so prominently displayed the female form. It was a world of stark contrasts, covered from wrist to ankle by day, yet artfully revealed by night. The skirt is even more magnificent than your day skirt, wider and more richly decorated. It falls over your largest crinoline, a cascade of silk adorned with delicate flounces of white lace and tiny sweet little bows of satin ribbon. As you pull the gown on, the sheer sound of it is intoxicating, a crisp, expensive rustle that announces your presence before you even enter a room. Fastening this bodice is an act of cooperation, requiring your maid to pull the laces at the back taut before securing a final row of hidden hooks. The fit is precise, sculptural. You feel transformed, not just into an evening version of yourself, but into a walking piece of art. Sometimes, for truly grand occasions, the embellishments could become fantastically exotic. Some gowns were trimmed with the iridescent wing cases of jewel beetles imported from India. In the shimmering, shifting gaslight of a ballroom, these tiny pieces of nature would glitter with an intensity that no glass bead could replicate, turning the wearer into a mesmerizing, otherworldly creature. The new bright glare of gas lighting, which was becoming standard in public buildings and the homes of the wealthy, had a profound effect on fashion. It allowed for these shimmering fabrics and brilliant new chemical dyes, remember that vivid mauveine, to be appreciated in all their glory. But it also brought a terrible new danger. The combination of open gas flames and women wearing wide, airy crinolines covered in flammable fabrics like cotton tarlatan or gauze was a recipe for tragedy. A moment of carelessness, a skirt swinging too close to a sconce, could have horrific consequences. It was a well-known hazard of social life, a dark undercurrent to the glittering fantasy. Finally, the finishing touches that complete the metamorphosis. The long, white kidskin gloves are drawn on, reaching far up your bare arms, sometimes past the elbow. They are so tight that a special tool, a glove stretcher, might have been used beforehand to prepare them. Your jewelry is brought forth, a pearl necklace that sits just at the base of your throat, simple drop earrings, and a matching bracelet on your wrist. In your newly gloved hand, you will carry a fan, an indispensable tool for both circulating the stifling air of a crowded ballroom and for conducting the silent, coded language of flirtation. Your delicate, silk-slippered feet are barely visible beneath the vast hemisphere of your skirt. You are complete. Looking in the mirror, the woman of the morning is gone. In her place is a shimmering, graceful creation held together by discipline, whalebone, and dozens of tiny, well-placed pins. You are ready for the ball.
The carriage ride home is a muted affair, a gentle swaying in the deep, velvety dark of the city at rest. The clip-clop of the horses' hooves on the empty streets is a soft, hypnotic rhythm, a world away from the bright cascade of string music you have been immersed in for the past several hours. Leaning your head back against the upholstered seat, you are profoundly aware of the architecture holding you upright. The corset is a stern companion, even now. You feel a bone-deep weariness, not from exertion, but from the simple, sustained effort of being on display, of maintaining that perfect posture, that placid expression, of being a living, breathing work of art. Back within the familiar silence of your own home, the air is cool and still. The gas lamps have been turned down low, casting a soft, forgiving glow. The journey back to your bedchamber is a slow procession, the grand silk skirt whispering against the floorboards with a tired sigh. The transformation that felt so magical hours ago is now a cage from which you long to be released. This is the final ritual of the day, the great undressing. The small personal items are the first to go. Your fan is laid upon a side table, its delicate painted leaves furled shut. The pearl necklace is unclasped, cool and heavy in your palm for a moment before you place it gently in its plush, velvet-lined box. The earrings follow, and your earlobes tingle with a faint sense of release. Next, the gloves. Your maid helps you, gently working the tight kidskin down over your hands, peeling them away inch by slow inch. The air on your bare arms and hands feels revelatory, a return to self. They are faintly damp, and pale indentations at your elbows mark where the fabric was tightest. Now for the gown. You stand, patient and still, as the long series of hooks or laces at your back are worked free. There is a gathering sense of relief as the tension across your back and shoulders slackens. The magnificent bodice is eased forward and off your shoulders, and you finally shrug out of it. The great shimmering mass of the silk skirt is unfastened at the waist and lifted carefully over your head, its weight and rustle disappearing in a single swooping motion. A lady's maid will meticulously hang it, airing it out and checking for any tiny spills or tears, for a garment this costly is an investment to be preserved. For you, its departure is a liberation. Next, the intricate architecture of your hair. You sit before your vanity mirror, and pin by pin, the elaborate sculpture is dismantled. The false pieces are removed and stored away. The plaits are undone, and the waves are loosened. Finally, a brush is drawn through your hair, the long, slow strokes releasing the last of the day's tension from your scalp. It falls, unconstrained, over your shoulders. This simple act feels like one of the day's greatest luxuries. You are now back where you were in the late afternoon, standing in your foundational layers. You step out of the giant, lightweight cage of the crinoline, which is leant against a wall where it stands like a curious piece of abstract art. The final, softer petticoats follow, leaving you in just your underlinens. And then, the moment you have been waiting for, consciously or not, since you first pulled the laces tight some 17 hours ago. The corset. You turn, presenting your back to your maid. She expertly unhooks the laces from where they were secured, and with a few swift pulls, the entire structure loosens its grip. The pressure recedes. You can feel your own body begin to reclaim its natural shape. Then, you turn back to the mirror, and with your own fingers, you unhook the front busk, clasp by clasp. The stiff halves of the corset fall away. You take a breath, a real one, a deep, unimpeded breath that fills your lungs completely and pushes your stomach outward. It is an act of pure animal relief, so profound it is almost dizzying. Your skin bears the faint red imprints of the boning channels and the lacing, a temporary map of your day-long confinement. It is in this moment, more than any other, that you feel the profound physical cost of being a proper Victorian woman. Was this daily release a sweet reward for a day of respectable duty, or was it a stark, private reminder of the prison that awaited you again at dawn? historians ponder this very question, trying to decipher the true female experience from the letters and diaries that speak of both pride in one's fashionable appearance and the secret joy of its removal. The remaining layers fall away quickly now. The corset cover, the drawers, the garters unfastened, and the silk stockings peeled from your legs. Finally, you pull the simple chemise over your head. For a moment, you are as you began the day, unadorned and unbound. Your skin tingles in the cool air of the room. But unlike the morning's chill, this coolness heralds rest, not labor. Your nightdress is waiting. It is a long, loose garment of soft, well-washed cotton, utterly shapeless and wonderfully comfortable. As you pull it over your head, it feels like a final surrender. There is no waist to cinch, no bust to elevate, no posture to force. It is a garment of pure utility and ease. You might also don a nightcap, a simple cotton cap tied under the chin. It is not a fashion statement, but a deeply practical piece of clothing designed to keep your head warm through the long, cold nights in a house where the fires have been banked low and the chill seeps in through every window frame and door jamb, a fact of life as constant as the rising sun. Remember the cold from this morning. It has been your silent companion all day, and it will be with you through the night. You perform a simple final act of hygiene, wiping the last of the rice powder from your skin with a cloth dampened with cool water. Perhaps a touch of cold cream is applied, a slick, comforting balm. At long last, you approach your bed. You pull back the heavy covers and slip between the cold, crisp linen sheets. The bed is deep and soft, and you sink into it, the weight of your own body a welcome anchor. There are no more rules to follow, no more subtle signals to send with the flick of a fan, no more tiny buttons to fasten. Here in the dark, beneath the weight of the quilt, you are simply you. The vast, complicated machinery of your public self has been shed, leaving behind only the quiet, breathing reality. Your long day of following the intricate, demanding, and beautiful codes of your era is finally, blessedly over. And as your breath evens and you drift towards sleep, you are, for a few precious hours, completely and utterly free.
What it was like to live with 1920s social revolution. You awaken not to a deep, penetrating cold, but to the gentle warmth of sunlight pooling on the floor. The Great War is over. Its long, gray shadow, which has draped itself over every corner of life for years, has finally begun to recede. It is not gone, not entirely. Its presence lingers like a phantom limb, an ache that resurfaces in quiet moments. But the world, it seems, has decided to move on, with or without permission. And you can feel that decision in the very air you breathe. It feels lighter, thinner, charged with a nervous, electric hum of possibility that sneaks in through the open window, carrying the distant, unfamiliar sound of a motor car backfiring down the street. The routine of morning is a ghost of what it once was. You can still feel the memory of it, the muscle memory of layers and laces, of boning and buttons. Your mother still speaks of propriety, her voice carrying the weight of that older world. But for you, something has irrevocably snapped. You slide out of bed, your bare feet meeting a warm patch of sunlight on the wood floor. Your nightdress is a simple, loose slip of cotton, no ruffles, no high lace collar. Already you were freer than a woman of the previous generation would have been at any point in her day. You walk to your wardrobe, and here the revolution is tangible. The dark, heavy mahogany fortress of your parents' era has been replaced by a smaller, more practical closet. Inside, there is no army of structured bodices and voluminous skirts. There are simple, straight-hanging dresses made of lighter fabrics, cotton voiles, soft wool crepes, and the new miracle fabric, rayon. They call it artificial silk, and while it doesn't quite have the whisper of the real thing, it has brought a new, shimmering accessibility to fashion. It's the great pretender, and in a world busy reinventing itself, a little pretense feels entirely appropriate. Today's foundation is not an architectural project. You reach not for a chemise, drawers, and corset cover, but to a single elegant garment, a step-in chemise or a teddy. It's a delicate all-in-one piece of silk or rayon, combining the chemise and drawers into a loose, straight-hanging garment that you simply step into. It feels like wearing almost nothing. It skims your body rather than clinging to it, a secret whisper of freedom against your skin. And then comes the most significant absence of all. There is no corset. For years, women have been gradually moving away from the extreme S-bend silhouette, but the war, which required women to work in factories and on farms, dealt the final, killing blow to the everyday corset. It was impractical, restrictive, and suddenly deeply old-fashioned. You might still wear a light corselet or girdle for a special occasion, a soft, elasticated garment designed to smooth your hips rather than wrench your waist. But for a day like today, nothing. You take a breath, a full, easy breath that your mother would have called unladylike. You slouch just a little because you can. This new freedom feels strange, a little frightening even, like walking without a protective shell you didn't know you were relying on. Over this, you pull on a simple slip dress to prevent the still somewhat sheer fabric of your dress from being see-through. Then the dress itself. It is a simple tube of navy blue crepe de chine with a dropped waist that sits not at your natural waist but low on your hips, creating a long, boyish torso. The neckline is a modest scoop, and the sleeves are long and straight. There are no fussy buttons up the back. You simply pull it on over your head. The whole process of getting dressed, which once took the better part of an hour, is now accomplished in under 5 minutes. This efficiency is the very spirit of the age. This newfound simplicity was made possible by the rise of mass production. The era of every dress being a bespoke creation was fading. Now you could look through a Sears Roebuck catalog and order a stylish, ready-made frock to be delivered to your door. This access to fashion was a democratizing force, shrinking the visual gap between a society wife and a department store clerk. Now, you sit at your vanity, and here is where the new artifice begins. If the body is to be downplayed, boyish and straight, the face is to be celebrated. You take out your compact of face powder and a small, richly pigmented pot of rouge. Unlike the near-invisible cosmetics of the past, this is meant to be seen. You apply the rouge in a deliberate circle on each cheek, a doll-like flush of health and vitality. Then the lips. A deep red lipstick in a sleek metal tube is carefully applied to form a Cupid's bow, a sharp, precise, almost heart-shaped mouth that completely ignores the natural line of your lips. It is a painted mask of youthful defiance. And finally, the great question. Your hair. It is long, as a respectable woman's hair has always been. It is heavy. It is a nuisance to wash, to dry, to pin up every single day in intricate, headache-inducing styles. But you have seen the pictures in the magazines. You have seen the daring girls in the city, their heads sleek and shorn, their eyes looking out from under a fringe with a confidence that seems both shocking and thrilling. Historians still argue whether the flapper, with her boyish figure and shockingly short hair, was a symbol of true feminist liberation, casting off the physical constraints of the past to claim a new androgynous power,
or if she was simply trading one set of demanding beauty standards for another, albeit one that allowed for a great deal more dancing. The debate itself speaks to the radical nature of the change. You pick up the sewing shears from your table. They are cold and heavy. This is not a task for a fancy salon, but a private, decisive act. You look at your reflection, at the long plaits hanging over your shoulders, and you think of the weight of them, the weight of tradition, the weight of expectation. You take a deep, corset-free breath, and then you lift the shears to the base of the first plate. There is a dull, shocking snip, a sound both quiet and deafening. The long braid comes away in your hand, feeling surprisingly light, like a dead thing. You repeat the act on the other side. Snip. Your head feels unbalanced, strangely, impossibly light. Your neck feels naked, cold. The back is a mess, of course. You'll have to go to a proper barber now to have it shaped into a true bob. And this very act, entering the masculine space of a barbershop, is a quiet revolution in itself. The bobby pin had to be invented for a reason. A whole new industry was rising to meet the needs of this sudden, widespread shearing. You look in the mirror at the rough, uneven beginnings of your new self. A round-cheeked girl with a painted mouth and shorn hair, wearing a dress that looks suspiciously like a stylish burlap sack. You do not look like your mother. You do not look like the women in the old portraits. You look like you belong to the future, and you have absolutely no idea what you're going to do with it.
The short, hacked-off ends of your hair feel impossibly light against your neck. You've done the deed, and now you must see it through. Walking to a barber, a real men's barbershop with its red and white striped pole, is an act of bravery. As you push open the door, a little bell tinkles, and the conversation within stops. The room smells of talcum powder, bay rum, and tobacco. For a moment, you are an alien creature under a microscope. But then the barber, a man with a magnificent mustache who has seen it all, simply gestures you to an empty chair. He knows this new world is good for business. He deftly, professionally shapes the ragged mess you made into a sharp, fashionable Dutch boy bob, straight and even all the way around, with a heavy fringe across your forehead. You pay the man, step back out onto the street, and the world seems louder, faster, and bigger than it did this morning. Or perhaps it is simply that you are now more properly equipped to meet it. The street itself is a river of noise and movement. The gentle, rhythmic clip-clop that defined the soundscape of your childhood is gone, drowned out by a cacophony of sputtering engines, rattling chassis, and the occasional startling honk of a rubber bulb horn. The air smells not of horses and hay, but of gasoline and hot metal. This is the new symphony of progress, and at its heart is the machine that has changed everything, the automobile. Thanks to Henry Ford and his miraculous moving assembly line, the car is no longer the exclusive plaything of the wealthy. The black Model T, affectionately nicknamed the Tin Lizzie, is everywhere, boxy and proud. They're surprisingly spry, bouncing over uneven city streets and kicking up dust on country roads. And today, you are going for a ride. Your young man arrives not in a horse-drawn buggy that would require a slow, careful pace, but at the wheel of his own Ford. Getting in is an entirely new kind of physical poetry. There is no vast crinoline to negotiate, no fear of catching hoops on a carriage step. Your new, shorter skirt and straight-lined dress make hopping in a simple, athletic gesture. He cranks the engine to life with a jolt, and you're off, merging into the stream of traffic. Driving feels like flying low to the ground. The wind rushes past the open sides of the car, whipping at the short strands of your hair. Remember the restrictive bonnet designed to frame your face and keep your gaze forward? You think of it now and almost laugh. Your vision is panoramic, a dizzying blur of shops, pedestrians, and other cars. There is an exhilarating sense of control and freedom that the slow, lumbering pace of the past could never have provided. This little sputtering machine is not just a mode of transport. It is a declaration of independence. It allows you to escape the tight-knit, watchful community of your own neighborhood. The automobile became, for many young people, a sort of portable parlor, a private space, free from the supervising eyes of parents, leading to a massive shift in courtship rituals. The formal call in the family living room was being replaced by the casual, mobile date. Of course, this new automotive age has its quirks. Not every city has figured out traffic lights yet, so intersections can be a thrilling gamble of nerve and timing. And out in the countryside, the roads might dissolve from pavement into little more than muddy tracks, turning a pleasant drive into an adventure in amateur mechanics. You pass a family on the side of the road having a picnic. They are auto camping, a popular new pastime where you pack up your tent and supplies into the back of your car and simply head out into nature for the weekend. The car is rewriting the very concept of leisure. As dusk begins to settle, you return home. The house is quiet, but a different kind of quiet than the silence of the pre-war era. It is an expectant quiet. In the corner of the living room sits a new piece of furniture, a handsome wooden cabinet with an array of mysterious knobs and dials on the front. This is the radio. Tonight, you are the one operating it. It's a physical process. You turn the dial, and the machine responds with a chorus of whistles, hisses, and pops. You are trawling through the invisible ether, hunting for a signal. Then, through the static, a sound begins to emerge. It's faint at first, crackling and distant, but you carefully adjust another knob, and it clarifies. It's music. But it's a music unlike anything your parents would recognize as such. It is not the stately, predictable melody of a waltz or the soaring, formal beauty of an orchestra. It is something else entirely. It's jazz. A piano lays down a jaunty, rolling rhythm, but a trumpet cuts across it, bending notes in ways you didn't know were possible. The beat is syncopated, off-kilter, a playful stumble and recovery that feels like the very sound of a new, uncertain age. It makes your foot tap. It makes you want to move in ways that have nothing to do with a carefully rehearsed cotillion. This box of wooden wires is piping the sound of Chicago or New Orleans directly into your living room. The rise of radio broadcasting was meteoric. At the start of the decade, it was a niche hobby for technical enthusiasts. By the middle of the decade, it was a ubiquitous piece of furniture, a central hearth around which the family now gathered. For the first time, the entire country could listen to the same presidential address, the same baseball game, the same music, all at the same time. Historians still argue whether the radio was a great unifying force, creating a single, homogenized national culture from coast to coast, or if, by popularizing controversial sounds like jazz, it actually served to deepen the generational and cultural divides already fracturing the country. Both, of course, were happening at once. While one family tunes into a calming symphony performance, another, like yours, might be leaning in close, soaking up the vibrant, energetic, and, to some, scandalous sound of the jazz age. You close your eyes and just listen. The saxophone seems to be telling a joke. The drummer is a speeding engine. This is the soundtrack to your shorn hair, to the rush of wind in an open car, to a world that feels like it's just hit the accelerator and has no intention of touching the brakes.
The last notes of the jazz broadcast fade into a soft crackle of static, and you click off the radio. The silence that fills the living room feels different now, not empty, but humming with the phantom energy of the music. The house feels smaller, the familiar wallpaper and inherited furniture seeming quaint and staid compared to the riotous sound that just filled the space.
A new kind of restlessness has taken root in you, a yearning for a place where that music isn't just a ghostly transmission, but a living, breathing thing. You have a new haircut. You have a new, unconstricted way of moving through the world. Now, you need a new place to be. The United States is, officially, a dry country. In 1920, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution went into effect, prohibiting the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. The grand ambition was to cure society of its ills, to empty the prisons, reduce domestic violence, and create a more productive, moral populace. This was the great social experiment known as Prohibition. In practice, however, it did something quite different. It turned millions of otherwise law-abiding citizens into casual criminals and created one of the most vibrant, secretive, and surprisingly integrated social scenes the nation had ever known: the speakeasies. Tonight, you will not be staying in. You shed your simple day dress for something with a little more shiver. It's still a simple, drop-waisted silhouette, but this one is made of pale green silk and embroidered with hundreds of tiny glass beads. They catch the light with every movement, creating a dazzling, liquid effect. It is a dress made for dancing, its hemline a little higher, its material a little more fluid. The boyish silhouette of your bob haircut is softened with a fashionable beaded headband. You add a string of long glass beads that sways against your chest. Your transformation is complete. You are no longer a girl of the daytime. You are a creature of the night. Your escort arrives, not with a corsage, but with a hushed sense of conspiracy and a destination that isn't spoken aloud. You get into his Ford, the portable parlor once again serving its purpose, and drive not toward the respectable theater district to a slightly grimy-looking alley in a nondescript part of town. You stop before a heavy, windowless wooden door. There is no sign, no welcoming lantern, only a small sliding peephole set at eye level. This is the ritual. Your escort gives a specific rhythmic knock. Knock, 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 knock. There is a pause, a moment of silence from within. Then a small metal slot slides open, revealing a pair of suspicious eyes. A gruff voice mutters a password query. Is Oscar in? Your escort leans in close to the door and gives the countersign, a seemingly nonsensical phrase learned from a friend who learned it from a friend. He's expecting us for a game of billiards. The eyes scrutinize you for a moment longer. Then, with a satisfying clunk of a heavy bolt being drawn, the door swings inward, and you step across the threshold, not just into a room, but into another reality. The contrast is breathtaking. From the dark, silent alley, you are plunged into a basement filled with light, laughter, and a haze of cigarette smoke. And there, in the corner, on a small raised platform, is a live jazz band, playing with an energy that makes the radio broadcast seem like a pale imitation. The air thrums with it. The room is crowded, tables packed close together, with men in smart suits and women in shimmering dresses just like yours. Waiters navigate the tight spaces, balancing trays laden with teacups and coffee mugs. But what's inside them isn't tea or coffee. It is illicitly obtained, often bathtub brewed, gin and bootleg whiskey. This is the great wink and nod of the speakeasy. The pretense of legality was part of the fun. A quirky side effect of this illegal trade was the sudden popularization of the cocktail. Faced with gin that was often harsh and unpalatable, bartenders became inventive chemists, mixing the raw alcohol with fruit juices, honey, and flavored syrups to make it drinkable, inadvertently creating classic cocktails like the bee's knees. You find a small table, and here is where you notice the most revolutionary thing about the room. It's not just the illegal booze or the scandalous music, it's the people. Men and women are mixing in a way that was unthinkable in the stiff, formal saloons of the pre-war era. Those had been exclusively male domains. Here, men and women drink together, smoke together, and laugh together. Young and old, rich and not so rich, are rubbing shoulders. This hidden, illegal world has paradoxically created a more democratic and integrated social space than the legal world outside. Historians still argue about the true social impact of prohibition. Was it a colossal failure that fueled the rise of organized crime and fostered a culture of disrespect for the law? Or was it, in some strange, unforeseen way, a liberating force, particularly for women, who were now welcomed into a nightlife scene from which they had previously been barred? The answer, as always, is a complex knot. You can see both sides of the argument right here in this smoky, vibrant, slightly dangerous room. On the small, crowded dance floor, couples are doing the Charleston, a wild, syncopated dance of kicking feet and swinging arms that is as energetic and defiant as the music. It would have been impossible to perform in a corset. Your new body, your new freedom of movement was made for this. You watch them, mesmerized. Soon you are pulled from your chair and find yourself on the floor, your own beaded dress shimmying, your feet attempting to keep up with the frenetic, joyful rhythm. It's clumsy at first, then exhilarating. You are part of the energy, not just an observer. In this basement, a whole new social vocabulary is being written. People use slang you've only read about in magazines. A cool girl is the cat's pajamas. Something wonderful is the bee's knees. The men who bring in the liquor are bootleggers, so named for the practice of concealing flasks in their tall boots. You feel a thrill of being on the inside of something, a secret shared language for a secret shared experience. This is the heart of the 1920s social revolution. It's not happening in the halls of government or the pages of serious books. It's happening here, underground, in the dark, powered by bad gin, great music, and the collective, youthful desire to shed the old world and dance headfirst into the new one.
The energetic chaos of the Charleston leaves you breathless, happy, and slightly sticky from the sugary concoction in your teacup. As you make your way back to your table, weaving through the laughing, smoking, shimmying crowd, the feeling of being part of a secret is intoxicating. This hidden world feels more real, more vital than the polite, sunlit world you inhabit during the day. It's a university of modern life, and you are learning a new curriculum with every whispered conversation and syncopated beat. But the revolution is not just about bobbed hair, fast cars, and illegal gin. Those are merely the outward symptoms of a much deeper, more profound shift happening in the way people think about themselves and the world. Back at your table, the conversation turns from the quality of the band to the latest shocking book everyone is talking about, or a strange new idea floating out of Vienna. The social revolution is also a revolution of the mind. Your friends discuss the work of Sigmund Freud. His name is everywhere, a whispered password in intellectual circles, his ideas dissected and debated, often in wildly simplified forms in popular magazines. The notion that your conscious self is just the tip of the iceberg, that beneath the surface lies a vast,
turbulent ocean of unconscious desires, repressed memories, and primal drives is a deeply unsettling yet thrilling concept. The idea of the subconscious gives people a new language to talk about their own feelings and motivations. Suddenly, a simple slip of the tongue isn't just a mistake, it's a Freudian slip, a revelatory glimpse into the hidden machinery of the mind. You find yourself listening as a friend who is attending college talks about the Oedipus complex. It's shocking, bizarre, and feels vaguely scandalous to even discuss, but it's also oddly compelling. It suggests that the proper, predictable family structures you took for granted are in fact seething cauldrons of psychological drama. This fascination with psychology represents a turn inward. If the old world was defined by rigid social structures and external rules of propriety, the new world is increasingly fascinated by the mysterious, uncharted territory of the individual psyche. This intellectual curiosity extends to all areas of life. The rigid certainties that guided your parents' generation, absolute faith in tradition, religion, and established institutions, were casualties of the Great War. You and your friends are part of what Gertrude Stein dubbed the lost generation, not necessarily because you fought, but because you came of age in the war's bewildering aftermath. Having seen a world order shatter, you are less inclined to take anything for granted. You are questioning everything. This includes the very nature of relationships between men and women. The rise of coeducational colleges and the entry of women into the workplace are changing the dynamics of interaction. Young people are talking about the idea of companionate marriage, a radical notion that a marriage should be based not just on social standing and economic convenience, but on genuine friendship, mutual interests, and, most shockingly of all, romantic and physical compatibility. You hear conversations that would have been utterly unthinkable a decade ago, whispered discussions about birth control, a topic still mired in legal and social controversy, yet fiercely championed by activists like Margaret Sanger as essential for female liberation. A fringe but fascinating reflection of this questioning spirit can be seen in the brief, flickering popularity of seances and spiritualism. After the staggering loss of life in the war and the great influenza pandemic that followed, many people, desperate for connection and meaning, turned to mediums and psychics who claimed they could communicate with the dead. It was a strange intersection of grief and a new openness to the unseen, a kind of psychological exploration that bled into the supernatural. While many saw it as charlatanism, for others it was a genuine, if unconventional, attempt to make sense of a world torn apart by inexplicable loss. Historians still argue about the true depth of this intellectual revolution for the average person. Was the widespread discussion of Freudian psychology and companionate marriage a sign of a genuinely liberated modern mindset taking hold across society? Or was it more of a fashionable parlor game for a self-consciously modern urban elite with little real impact on the lives of most people in more traditional parts of the country? The Roaring '20s were, after all, a decade of profound contradictions, a time of flappers and jazz, but also of deep religious fundamentalism and the rise of the second Ku Klux Klan. The future was roaring ahead, but the past was clinging on with fierce determination. As the hour grows late, the jazz band plays a slower, more mournful tune. The energy in the speakeasy begins to wane, replaced by a kind of weary camaraderie. You and your friends fall into a more reflective silence. You think about your short hair, the freedom of your uncorseted body, the thrill of the automobile, the secret knock on the door, and these new, dizzying ideas about the landscape of your own mind. It feels like you have lived a week in a single day. The journey home through the sleeping city feels different. The dark streets are not an ending, but a pause. You return to your quiet house, slipping through the door like a spy returning from a mission. In your room, you shed the beaded dress, its shimmer now subdued in the moonlight. You wipe the Cupid's bow from your lips, revealing your own mouth beneath. As you slide into your simple nightdress, you feel the day's revolution settle inside you. You are not the same person who awoke this morning. You have danced a forbidden dance, explored a hidden world, and entertained ideas that would have terrified your grandmother. You lie in bed. Your light, shorn head feels cool on the pillow. You are living in the future. And as you fall asleep to the distant, lonely sound of a passing motor car, you realize with a thrill that feels like both a promise and a warning, the revolution has only just begun.
What it was like to live under Soviet social control. The first thing you are aware of is not light nor cold, but sound. A sound from outside your own body, beyond the immediate circle of your own sleeping family. It is the sound of a key turning in a lock, then the muffled scrape of a boot, followed by a low, phlegmy cough. It is your neighbor, Comrade Ivanov, leaving for an early shift at the factory. You don't need a clock to know the time. You can tell it by the rhythms of the building, by the symphony of other people's lives that seeps through the thin partitions of your world. You lie still, trying to cling to the last frayed threads of sleep, but it's no use. The communal apartment, the kommunalka, is waking up. A baby starts to cry in the room across the long central corridor, the Annenkov's youngest. From the shared kitchen at the far end of the hall, you hear the unmistakable hiss and sputter of a Primo stove being lit, followed by the clatter of a metal kettle on its grate. That will be Olga Petrovna, the self-appointed guardian of the hallway's conscience, whose personal schedule is everyone's schedule. Having a neighbor with an ironclad sense of duty is its own special kind of alarm clock, one without a snooze button. Slowly, carefully, you swing your legs out from the narrow cot you sleep on. Your feet find the cool, worn floorboards of the one room your family calls home. It is a grand room, or it was once. If you look up, you can still see the faded opulence of a pre-revolutionary past. An ornate plaster medallion in the center of the high ceiling, from which a single bare bulb now hangs. This magnificent space, once a rich merchant's drawing room, was partitioned after the revolution as part of the uplotnenia policy, the compression or compacting of bourgeois apartments to create housing for the workers. What was once for one family is now for five. 5 families, 5 worlds, sharing one corridor, one kitchen, and one bathroom. Privacy is a foreign currency here, an unaffordable luxury. Your parents are asleep behind a curtain that bisects the room, a flimsy, symbolic border. Your younger brother mutters in his sleep on a small sofa against the far wall. Every movement you make is a calculation, an effort to exist without disturbing the delicate ecosystem of your tiny shared space. You dress quietly in the half-light, pulling on simple, durable trousers and a plain shirt. The clothes are functional, meant for a day of work, not for display. You open your door with a practiced slowness to minimize its habitual squeak and step into the corridor. The air here is a thick soup of smells: damp plaster, boiled cabbage from last night's dinners, Olga Petrovna's chicory coffee, and the faint, ever-present scent of cheap tobacco. The corridor is a world unto itself, a long, dim artery connecting the various cells of the communal body. The grand wallpaper is peeling, and the once gleaming parquet floor is scuffed and dull from the tread of dozens of feet. Each of the 5 doors off this hall is a frontier, a portal to a different family's sovereign territory of 10 square meters. Your destination is the bathroom. As you pad down the hall, another door opens, and Comrade Morozov emerges, towel around his neck. You exchange a muted, formal "good morning."
a nod of acknowledgement between two ships passing in the dimly lit strait. There is a schedule, of course, an unwritten yet rigorously enforced timetable for the use of the bathroom and toilet. You know you have approximately 7 minutes before the Pavlov family needs their turn. Inside the small, humid bathroom, you perform your morning ablutions with practiced efficiency. You use your own bar of soap, which you brought with you and will take back to your room. You might even carry your own light bulb, screwing it into the empty socket for your visit and removing it when you leave. This isn't necessarily out of spite. It's just a simple fact of life when resources are scarce. You own your light, and your neighbor owns his. To leave a bulb in a public socket is an act of either extreme generosity or profound foolishness. Back in your room, your mother is now awake, heating water for tea on your family's own small Primo stove perched on a tiny table in the corner. This little corner is your kitchen, but for any real cooking, you must use the main kitchen, the great stage of the kommunalka. And as you step into that space to toast a piece of black bread, you enter the heart of the social organism. 4 other women are already there, each presiding over her own small cooking space. The air is thick with steam and quiet tension. Every utensil, every pot, every bag of onions is fiercely, though silently, guarded territory. You navigate the space with a learned choreography, careful not to bump Comrade Petrova's pot of kasha, careful to use only your allotted corner of the large central table. Here small dramas unfold daily through the medium of a borrowed salt shaker or a dirty dish left in the shared sink. This is control at its most granular level, a society in miniature where public scrutiny and the pressure to conform are as essential as bread and water. Historians still argue whether the communal apartment was primarily an emergency housing solution born of a massive urban crisis, or a deliberate ideological tool designed by the state to break down the old bourgeois notion of the private family unit and forge a new collective-minded Soviet person. Was it meant to create community, or simply to make surveillance easier? Living in one, you can feel the truth of both arguments. There is a sense of shared struggle, of mutual support in small measures. But there is also the inescapable feeling of being watched, your every action noted, judged, and filed away by your neighbors, who are in effect extensions of the state's gaze. As you eat your simple breakfast of black bread and weak tea, you gaze out the kitchen's grimy window at the courtyard below. A statue of Lenin stands in the center, one hand raised, as if pointing the way forward. His image is a silent, constant companion to your morning ritual. He is in the courtyard, on the posters you will pass on the street, in the newspaper your father will read. The state is not a distant, abstract concept. It is here, in your kitchen, in your hallway, in the very air you breathe. It has shaped the room you sleep in and the way you interact with the people you live beside. Your day of living under its vast, intricate system of social control has only just begun. It started with another man's cough, and now it continues under the ever-present gaze of a stone leader.
You leave the communal apartment, stepping out into the crisp morning air, and the feeling of being watched doesn't recede, it expands. The courtyard, with its silent, gesturing statue of Lenin, funnels you onto the wider street. And here, the personal, amateur surveillance of your neighbors is replaced by the official, omnipresent voice of the state. It is a visual and auditory landscape designed not just to guide you, but to constantly, quietly, relentlessly shape your thoughts. You walk towards the tram stop, and the walls of the buildings around you are alive with propaganda.
Huge posters, rendered in bold reds, blacks, and whites, depict heroic figures with determined jawlines and clear eyes. A muscular factory worker and a sturdy female collective farmer stand shoulder to shoulder, their tools held like weapons, gazing towards a radiant, stylized sun representing the bright socialist future. The slogans are short, powerful, and hammered home with visual force. Glory to labor. Fulfill the 5-year plan in 4 years. The people and the party are one. It is an art of absolute certainty, with no room for ambiguity or doubt. You pass a kiosk selling newspapers. There is only one you need to read, Pravda, which ironically means truth, or maybe its sibling, Izvestia, which means news. A common joke, always whispered, is that there is no news in the truth and no truth in the news. You don't buy a toppy. Your father already has one, or your work collective will have one pinned up for all to see. The headlines are as bold and heroic as the posters. They speak of record-breaking coal production in the Donbass region, of bumper wheat harvests on the steppes, of the successes of Soviet athletes on the international stage. Any news of the outside capitalist world is framed as a story of decay, decadence, and the exploitation of the working class. It is a narrative of unwavering progress at home and inevitable collapse abroad. The truth is what the party says it is, repeated daily until it settles deep in the mind. The tram arrives, a clanking, groaning metal box packed tight with your fellow citizens. You squeeze aboard, finding a place to stand in the swaying crowd. The atmosphere is one of weary solidarity. These are the faces of the city: factory workers, clerks, students, soldiers. Everyone is on their way to serve their function in the great state machine. You are all cogs, and your value is determined by your utility. Your assigned job might be at a massive industrial plant, a sprawling bureaucracy, or a state-run retail store. You don't have a career in the modern sense of a personal ladder to be climbed for your own enrichment. You have a position, a role assigned to you based on your education, your skills, and, crucially, your perceived political reliability. This is a cornerstone of Soviet control. The state is the ultimate employer. Your livelihood, your home, your access to goods and services are all tied to your relationship with the state as your boss. To lose your job is not just to lose a paycheck, it is to risk losing everything. This creates a powerful incentive for conformity. A wrong word, a careless joke, a friendship with the wrong person, these things can have dire professional consequences. As you get off the tram and walk the last few blocks to your workplace, you notice the architecture. It is monumental, imposing. New government buildings are vast, gray fortresses of concrete and steel, designed to express the power and permanence of the state. It is an architecture that makes the individual feel small, transient, and insignificant by comparison. Even the grand old buildings of the past have been repurposed. Ornate churches with their golden onion domes might now be warehouses for state atheism, their sacred art stripped out and replaced with exhibits proving the non-existence of God. Remember that fading medallion on your ceiling? It's a ghost of a different world, a world that has been systematically overwritten. Arriving at your workplace, let's say it's a large textile factory. You pass through the gates, showing your papers to a stern guard. Inside, the noise of the looms is deafening. More posters adorn the factory walls, these ones more specific to your tasks. Comrade, do not be idle. More fabric for the people. Beware of spies and workers. This last one is a quiet, chilling reminder. The narrative of progress requires enemies. If a machine breaks down or a production target is missed, it cannot be due to poor planning or faulty equipment.
It must be sabotage, the work of hidden counter-revolutionaries trying to undermine the glorious work of the proletariat. Your work collective is your secondary family. You work with these people, eat with them in the canteen, and attend mandatory meetings with them after your shift. These meetings are a ritual of social control. The local party organizer reads excerpts from Pravda, praises the most productive workers, the Stakhanovits, named after a legendary coal miner whose feats of productivity were endlessly promoted, and gently chastises those who are falling behind. Here, you are encouraged to participate in self-criticism, publicly admitting your own minor failings. This ritual is not about true confession. It's about demonstrating your loyalty and your submission to the collective's judgment. Historians debate the extent to which the average citizen truly believed the relentless propaganda they were immersed in daily. Did people internalize the message of the heroic posters and the triumphant headlines? Or did they develop a kind of doublethink, maintaining a public face of enthusiastic belief while harboring private skepticism? The answer is likely as varied as the people themselves. Some were true believers, filled with fervent revolutionary zeal. Others were cynical. But for most, perhaps it was something in between, a kind of weary acceptance. The state's narrative was the weather. You didn't have to like the rain, but you still had to live in it. To constantly fight against it was exhausting and dangerous. It was easier, safer, to simply put on your coat and get on with your day. One quirky but telling phenomenon was the Soviet obsession with chess. It was a state-sanctioned pastime, promoted as a symbol of socialist intellectual superiority. But for many, it was also a small, private escape, a world of pure logic and strategy, a black-and-white board with clear, unchangeable rules, a blessed relief from the gray ambiguities and shifting political winds of the real world.
The factory whistle screams, its shrill cry signaling the end of the shift. The roar of the looms winds down, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. A deep, bone-weary fatigue has settled in your limbs, a weariness that comes not just from physical labor, but from the sustained effort of navigating the day's social and political currents. Now comes your free time, the hours that are supposedly your own. But even this freedom is a carefully curated experience, gently guided and organized by the same paternal hand that steers your work life. As you leave the factory gates, you do not simply scatter to your individual homes and private whims. The collective has other plans. Tonight, there is a mandatory meeting for all members of the Komsomol, the all-union Leninist Young Communist League. Membership isn't technically compulsory, but not being a member is a conspicuous and potentially damaging choice, closing doors to higher education and better jobs. So, you go. The meeting is held in a red-draped hall under another imposing portrait of Lenin, this time flanked by a younger, more intense-looking Stalin. The agenda is predictable. A lecture on the dangers of Western cultural influence, a planning session for the upcoming May Day parade, and a round of enthusiastic volunteering for a weekend project to help beautify a local park. There is an art to attending these meetings. You must appear engaged, but not too engaged. To be silent is to be suspect, but to be too opinionated or ask the wrong kind of question is even worse. You learn to clap at the right moments, to nod in agreement with the speaker, to raise your hand to volunteer for the least strenuous task. It is a performance of conformity, a ritual to reaffirm your place within the group. This is the very essence of organized leisure. The state understands a profound truth. Idle hands and unguided minds can be dangerous. People left to their own devices might gather in unproductive ways, might think thoughts unbecoming of a Soviet citizen. Therefore, leisure time must also be productive, structured, and ideologically sound. Your free time is a resource to be invested in the collective project. Let's imagine you managed to avoid a weekend park beautification detail.
What are your options for a Saturday afternoon? You might visit a museum. The museums are grand and spotlessly clean, but what was once the Hermitage, a palace filled with the artistic treasures of the czars, is now a palace of art and culture for the people. The narrative has been adjusted. Religious paintings are framed as examples of feudal superstition. Portraits of aristocrats are presented as evidence of bourgeois decadence. The official story is woven into the very curation of the art. Or perhaps you decide to go to the cinema. The Soviet Union has a powerful and innovative film industry, producing masters like Sergei Eisenstein. But the films you see are rarely simple entertainment. They're parables. You will watch sweeping epics about the glorious revolution, heroic tales of Soviet spies outwitting clumsy capitalists, or stirring dramas about factory workers exceeding their quotas through sheer willpower. Love stories exist, but the ultimate love object is always the state. The climax of the film isn't just the boy getting the girl, it's the boy and the girl together meeting their production goals on the collective farm. Even comedy serves a purpose, usually by satirizing lazy bureaucrats or pre-revolutionary types, a reminder of the flaws the system is working to correct. One of the most peculiar, almost charming examples of state-guided fun was the network of palaces of pioneers for children. These were like extravagant community centers set up in expropriated mansions of the old elite, offering children a dazzling array of free after-school clubs, chess, engineering, ballet, radio building, aeronautics. It was a genuine attempt to nurture talent and provide opportunities. It was also an incredibly effective way to instill communist values from the earliest possible age, wrapping ideological training in the irresistible guise of fun and games. It's far easier to cultivate a loyal future citizen when you're also teaching them how to build a model airplane. Historians still debate the emotional impact of this relentlessly wholesome and purposeful leisure. Did citizens feel oppressed by the lack of genuine choice and spontaneity, or did they find comfort and security in the structured, predictable world of state-approved fun? For many, especially those who grew up knowing nothing else, it likely felt normal, even comforting. After all, the parks were clean, the films were uplifting, and the community activities provided a powerful sense of belonging. The human desire for fun is remarkably adaptable. Even within this rigid framework, people found ways to make it their own. Let's say tonight you forego the Komsomol meeting. You might spend your evening in the Park of Culture and Rest. It's a vast, beautifully maintained space. There are flower beds planted in the shape of a red star, kiosks selling ice cream and kvass, a tangy fermented bread drink, and a large outdoor stage for concerts and speeches. You walk along the wide, clean promenades with hundreds of other families. Speakers mounted on lampposts broadcast patriotic music at a pleasant, unobtrusive volume. The atmosphere is calm, orderly, and deeply peaceful. You can sit on a bench, watch the paddle boats on the lake, and for a moment, it is possible to forget the cramped chaos of your kommunalka, the grinding noise of the factory. This, perhaps, is the most seductive aspect of social control. It is not always a stern-faced man in a uniform. Sometimes it's a clean park, a free concert, a sense of safety and shared purpose. It's the quiet assurance that everyone is moving together in the right direction, even if you are not entirely sure where you're going. It's the gentle pressure of the crowd, the comfort of knowing your place, the relief of not having to make too many difficult choices for yourself. As you sit on the park bench, watching the sun set behind the monumental silhouette of a new university building, the state's embrace feels less like a prison and more like a cradle. And it is in that deceptive comfort that its power truly lies.
The last sweet strains of the patriotic march fade from the park's loudspeakers as twilight deepens into night. You make your way back through the darkening streets,
past the heroic posters that are now just monolithic shapes in the gloom. You return to your communalka, a building humming with the quiet, contained energy of dozens of lives preparing for rest. The central corridor is dimmer now, the air cooler. You nod again to Comrade Morozov as you pass, the bookend to your morning's greeting. A day of public life lived according to the script is over. You slip back into your family's room and gently close the door. And in this small act, in the quiet click of the latch, the world shrinks and transforms. The vast, impersonal, all-seeing state is left outside in the hallway, its voice muted by the thin wood of your door. Here, in the 10 square meters of your family's private space, a different reality is allowed to cautiously emerge. The performance is over. Your mother is sitting at the small table, darning a sock under the light of that single bare bulb. Your father is leaning back on his cot, staring at the ceiling. The heroic jaw lines and radiant futures of the posters have no place here. Here, there is only the weary truth of tired bodies and the quiet landscape of genuine, uncurated thought. The curtain separating your parents' bed from the rest of the room feels less like a flimsy partition and more like the curtain of a confessional. This is the sanctuary. It's not much, but it's yours. And this is where the second, unofficial script of the day begins. It is a script spoken in whispers, in sentence fragments, in the silent language of raised eyebrows and weary sighs. It is the descent of the kitchen table, or, in your case, the cot and the cramped corner. Your father might begin by reading an item from Pravda, not with the booming enthusiasm of a party organizer, but with a flat, quiet irony. It says here, Masha, that the grain harvest in the Ukraine has exceeded all expectations again. He doesn't need to say more. Everyone in the room knows the truth that exists behind the headline. They know it from the letters received from relatives in the countryside, or from the simple evidence of the food available in the state-run stores. The gap between the official narrative and lived reality is a chasm that everyone learns to navigate in silence. To speak of it openly, outside these four walls, is unthinkable. But here, a shared, knowing glance is enough. Your mother might complain in a low voice about the quality of the bread, or the fact that the queue for potatoes was 3 hours long. This is not a political critique. It is a simple statement of fact. But in a system that proclaims itself a worker's paradise, a complaint about the scarcity of basic foodstuffs is inherently political act. It is a small tear in the fabric of the official story. This kind of talk, the endless, detailed, and obsessive discussion of daily material life, becomes a coded way of talking about the system's larger failings without ever saying so directly. Historians try to piece together this hidden private world from diaries that were kept secret, from letters that were never meant to be read by outsiders, and from interviews conducted decades later. It's a painstaking process because it was a world that existed almost entirely in the perishable medium of the spoken word. They debate the nature of this kitchen table dissent. Was it a form of genuine resistance, a way of keeping the truth alive under the crushing weight of propaganda? Or was it merely a safety valve, a harmless way to blow off steam that ultimately posed no real threat to the regime's power? For you, living inside it, it feels like both. It is the only way to stay sane. Here, in the privacy of your room, you can listen to a forbidden broadcast.
Your father might pull out a small, home-modified radio, and with the volume turned down so low that you must all lean in close to hear, he will painstakingly dial through the static, hunting for a signal from the BBC or Voice of America. Hearing a different narrative, a different version of world events, is like taking a deep breath of fresh, clean air after hours in a stuffy, smoke-filled room. It is a vital, secret link to a world outside the suffocating embrace of the state. Here is where a truly dangerous conversation could happen. Perhaps an older relative is visiting, one who still remembers the world before the revolution. They might speak, their voice barely a whisper, of a time when there were churches on every corner, when you could buy anything you wanted in a private shop, when your family owned this entire apartment, not just a single room. For you, these are like fairy tales, unimaginable, dangerous, and deeply seductive. They are glimpses of a reality you have been taught to despise, but that sounds strangely, tantalizingly free. One of the quietest and most profound forms of Soviet social control was its command of history itself, rewriting textbooks, erasing inconvenient figures from photographs, and ensuring that each new generation had a weaker and weaker connection to the pre-revolutionary past. Remembering was an act of quiet defiance. Finally, your own thoughts. All day you have performed. You clapped for the Komsomol speaker. You stood in line patiently. You pretended to admire the poster of the heroic farmer. Here, you can let the mask slip. You can confide in your brother about how pointless the meeting felt, or laugh about the ridiculous plot of the film you saw. It is in these small, shared moments of genuine, unmonitored feeling that you rediscover yourself. You confirm to each other that you are not crazy, that you are not alone in seeing the gap between what you are told and what you experience. You prepare for sleep, pulling your cot into its nightly position. You say goodnight to your family, your voice is low. The last sound you hear before sleep is not a factory whistle or a patriotic march, but the familiar, gentle sound of your father's breathing behind the curtain. The state owns your labor, your leisure, and your public thoughts. It owns the streets, the schools, the factories. But here, in this 10-square-meter box, in the quiet darkness, you have clawed back a small piece of yourself. You close your eyes, and in the fleeting, unpoliced territory of your own dreams, you are, finally, completely your own.